Hey everyone, welcome back. This is At the Kitchen Table Podcast, episode number 9. I'm Jason Klink, your host. Today I'm joined by Zak Randall. Zak and I have traveled very similar paths, and I'm pretty excited about this conversation. Zak is co-founder and CEO of ThisGen. It's a company that's developing AI-powered tools to help 911 emergency communication center to hire, train, and support their people who are answering the call every day. ThisGen currently serves more than 220 emergency communication centers across 41 states and Canada, which is impressive. Zak currently is in the Chicago area, lives with his wife and his 3 young kids. He's built a company around a mission that is closely connected to something I've been talking a lot about over the last, 5 or 6 years, probably ad nauseum. How do we better support our 911 colleagues under the headset? So Zak, thank you and welcome for pulling up a chair to the kitchen table today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. ThisGen, when did you start that?
We got started in September of 2024.
September of 2024, and you're at 220 ECCs across. That's impressive. What pathway did you take to get to this? I mean, what were you doing prior to this, and what led you to create this company?
Yeah. So I got my start was in the technology side of things. So I did that for a number of years, mostly industry agnostic. And for the last 6 years, I worked with my co-founder, Aaron, at a healthcare startup out of Chicago. And then for the last 2 years of that, right around the time where AI sort of bubbling up, we knew we wanted to do something, and we'd had a lot of conversations about like what kind of thing we'd want to do, and then some of it came from the responsibility side of like, look, there's a lot of, at the time there's a lot of like mixed like excitement and fear, there still is, and for us it was, we're closer to it. We have a deep knowledge of it, and we want to see this used for good. I know that it's going to be used for bad, unfortunately. Like I'm sure that's going to happen, but we want to use it for good. So what does that look like? And so we started trying on different ideas, and some of that was like you get to try on technology. Some of it was you get to try on the like, what do I want to do? And haven't really found anything. And then fast forward to, a little bit, summer of 2024. And we had a friend reach out to us, and he's in the Champaign area, so, in Illinois. And he said, hey, I know you guys are doing cool stuff with voice AI. Any chance you could help me out? I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, I'm a CTO. I don't know what that means at the time. And I've got a new class starting tomorrow. And I've got to train them up. And I said, okay, well, what does it have to do with us? He said, well, I'm going to have to role play. And that's bad for everybody. I'm a terrible actor. I don't like to do it. I've got 5 folks in my class. I'm going to, pick up the phone, like, ring, ring, ring. Like, that's how we're going to do this. It's going to be one of me, one person that gets to take the call, 4 of them judging how terrible of an actor I am. Like, that's the process. It's terrible. Can you help? And so my co-founder, software engineer, is amazing at what he does. Stays up all night, builds him a prototype of what is now ThisGen, and sends it to him and says, hey, here's a way where you can simulate any kind of call. And that way they can practice, and they can all practice on their own. And it works great. About a week later, he sent back a message, said, guys, this is awesome. And I post, I hope you don't mind, I posted on a Facebook group, and we had a few others reach out. Could you help them too? I said, sure, we can help them. Yeah, send me over a list. And he sends over a list of 80 different PSAPs across the country. And I was like, hey man, that's more than a few. So I just picked up the phone and I started talking with folks, and I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the problem. I fell in love with the people because of what they were doing and how they were doing it, and the passion that they had for it. And I learned a ton, and have kept on learning since, but that's sort of how we got into it.
That's outstanding. And it's, like I said, it's so eerily similar, because in early 2023, I was talking to a former colleague. I was working at a different public safety technology company, and him and I were chit-chatting, and I go, this AI thing, I wonder how we can make it work for public safety. And him and I were kind of chewing the fat, going back and forth, and we talked about training, a lot of what you were talking about. We talked about What was the other thing? Oh, records management.
Oh, okay.
And
Yep.
then we got really into like workforce management scheduling. And I'm like, yeah, someday that AI, it could really do a lot for workforce management. And we left it there. So that was like early 2023, summer of 2023. I'm now in between companies and I'm like, I wonder if I can do something with this AI. And I went to a friend of mine, a former colleague, a different guy, who ended up being, my co-founder of a venture that we had started together. And I said, hey, I want to build this thing with data. What do you think? And he goes, sounds good to me. Why don't we try it? So I went to a data scientist friend of mine who's local to me. I said, hey, Nick, I want to build this thing with data. What do you think? And he's like, yeah, do that all day long. Good. Come on. So, we started looking at how AI could improve workforce management and scheduling and staffing because I kept all of my interactions in the 911 space and my former colleagues, because I spent, I talk about how I spent almost 20 years under the headset. And I watched them from the pandemic on just get their brains beat in because they started getting so short staffed.
Yeah.
And they were working 12 and 14 and 16-hour days every single day, including their day off. The only way they could get a day off is they called in sick and screwed somebody else.
Yep.
And they didn't have any answers to it. The leadership did not have any answers to how do we plug the holes in the bucket.
Yeah.
So you look at what you guys were doing and it's like, hey, I got to train these people and it's so inefficient. And I have to be a bad actor and pretend to be a 911 caller. And this is the best we can do.
Yeah.
And boom, here we go. Now we got technology to fix that. So cool. And it like 911's come a long way from when I started, because when I started, it was 2 computer screens, the main CAD screen, and then where you run people and run driver's license and look up calls. And now when I left, we had like 7 screens and all of this software, and it's even grown since 2019. It's just amazing what technology has done for the job. Like you said, they're still unsure about it. It still scares a lot of public, especially law enforcement. AI technology scares them of like, is this going to take my job? How can this do the job better than me? But then you have other companies that are doing voice or call triage and voice translation and stuff that we didn't have 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And going back to your original part of your story, like when I started training in 911, that's what it was. People are in the other room calling 911, and we had to manage and process the call. While you were, putting this together and, started looking at how this could help, what did you identify were kind of the big value propositions or the big pain points for 911 in the area that you were working in?
Yeah. So for us with we fell into training because we had a friend there, right? And so for us, that's where it all started. Was what are we solving for with training? And so we saw the enormous staffing shortages. We saw the really high turnover. We saw training times that were upwards of a year, and then the sort of fallout of that. If that's happening, then to your point, who's covering all the shifts? It's supervisor filling in, or you sort of, everybody else having to cover extra shifts. And so you've got this like layer of burnout. And then so you have burned out people training the new folks on time that they don't have when it's taking too long to do all of that. Right. So like, it's just like stacked layers and layers of problems.
Oh God, yes.
And so the opportunity for us was not just to do something that was like, it was fun. Like obviously, no, maybe not obviously. Like I love the technology side. I have fun doing it. Like building a realistic simulator that can like realistically simulate calls is an interesting, like intellectually interesting problem to solve. But it was really important to us that we weren't just solving like an interesting thing, but it like worked. And so we really early on did a pilot and a study behind it to say, hey, can we move the needle on pick any one of those things? Like, can I change something? And we showed that we could reduce training time by 40%. And when you have that long of training time, like a 40% reduction is huge to mean that you get, folks into a seat faster, and not just faster, but that they were more confident, right? So that because the stakes are real, right? The stakes is like in many calls can be life and death. And if that's the case, you can be, if you're undertrained, you are terrified that you're going to cause harm. And if that's the case, you don't feel confident in your role, and you're more like there's these cycle there's that cycle of why people wash out early on or burn out later on, and so being able to help them train faster and be more confident in their role, that was the huge opportunity that we started with, and then since then we've expanded to help hire the right folks, to make sure that you're being able to identify who's going to be a good fit, because I think there's a lot of a lack of awareness around what the job actually looks like. And so can you help people get the right people in so that you can train them well? And then, we're moving into more, can we continue to support them as they grow in their career?
That's fantastic. What was your biggest, as you jumped into this, not coming from the public safety world, not working under the headset, what was probably some of your biggest takeaways after you started jumping into this about emergency communications and 911?
Yeah, I think for me, there's two, like, I don't know, moments where I was just like, are we serious right now? One was when I looked at the technology stack, where coming from the outside, like the tools that are available for like sales and marketing and just like selling you better trinkets, like incredible tools, like, oh, we'll make everything work. And then I would come and I would see some of what was available, and I was like, really? We're on a command line here. Like, this is crazy. We could just do so much better than this.
Yeah.
And they're doing it. Like, it's available everywhere else. And so that was one. And then two was I just had no idea how hard the job was. Zero. I've never sat in the seat. I've never, so for me, I had some vague, I don't know exactly what it was, but it was very vague, and I didn't really get a sense for it until, and I think that the clearest moment was probably, I'm continuing to learn this, was probably, I don't know, 4 months ago or so, when we have our training simulator where we can simulate any call. And I've gotten pretty good at, decent at that, of sort of the call taking side. And then we added the radio simulation. And so now I have to take the call and I have to do the radio simulation. The folks are moving on the map, and so I've got to be paying attention to that. I've got to be and I've got to be entering everything into CAD. And so now we have a much more realistic setup of everything going on, and I've got tabs, popped out. And I'm just awful at it. Like, I'm just so bad at it. And I like to think I'm good at lots of things, and I just could not do it for the life of me. And I was like, man, this is why you need training. This is why it takes so long. And that's a simulation of it. And where there's even more, there's more things that we haven't layered in yet. I didn't. So anyway, that was, it was still very surprising to me how difficult the job is, and continuing to learn that and all of the different pieces that go into it.
Yeah. And the technology challenges in some areas are just, I spent some time working in public safety scheduling. So I would talk to public safety agent 911 centers alike that, they'd have a staff of 75 or 100, and they're trying to manage their schedule on a Excel spreadsheet.
Yep.
I joke now, I was working for a next generation 911 technology company, and we had the opportunity to work with NYPD 911. And I go to their ECC, and I walk up, and it's just this huge fortress, right? And I walk in, and you got to go through security, and you go to the operations floor, and one side of the room is FDNY communications, the other side of the room is NYPD communications, and EMS is somewhere in the middle there. And I always joke that, like, it was North Korea, South Korea. NYPD communications was North Korea. They had very little technology. Everything was locked down. They couldn't use their cell phones. They couldn't access the internet. And then you had FDNY communications 911, and they were South Korea, and they had all the access they could want to technology. They could use their cell phones, access the internet. And that was in one building.
Yeah.
That was like that. So, these are the challenges that hamper the industry.
I think that disparity between certain, within the center, but certainly between big centers and small centers. And that was something that was important to us too. And it was like my back, I came from a small rural town in Indiana, where you literally knew everybody. When my wife first visited, we were like, hey, like, you can show me a tour. And, she walk towards the car. I said, no, we're walking, right? Like, this is not that kind of place, right? So very, very small town where you just look out for folks. And so for me, when I joined in, and I looked at the map of all of the different, ECCs across the country, it's all super reality. You have tons of really small rural places. And for me, it was really important that those communities, they need the technology just as much as everybody else, right?
Yeah.
They're the communities that they serve deserve all of that. Just,
Yep.
And so much of it was also like making accessible technology, not just really good technology, which was really important, but also that it could be accessible by anyone, right? Like that was an important piece as we've been building.
Yeah, that's such an important point right there, because accessible and available, and it's tough for some agencies to get accessible and available.
Yeah.
And throughout my work, again, Next Gen 911 company, we're working with this small 911 center in Central Ohio as part of a sheriff's office, and they loved the Next Gen 911 technology, and they were in position to purchase a new phone system. Well, the company had a Next Gen 911 phone system, and the salesperson that gave them their price quote, I don't know what he was thinking, but like, this center was never ever going to be able to afford or budget for the amount they were given.
Yeah.
And as a customer success manager, I went back to the teams and I'm like, how do we make this accessible and available to the small center so they can buy it? Because they want to buy it tomorrow. And everybody went to work, and it was all cloud-based and web-based. So they did a little bit on-prem, they did a little bit cloud and web-based, and they kind of put it together, and boom, they created a price and a product that the center could afford. But without that extra legwork, they could have just been shoved aside, and they would never have gotten what they were actually looking for. As you kind of interact with the different ECCs and their leadership, what are you hearing? What is the current pain points that, is it staffing? Is it training? Is it all of the above? What are you hearing when you're doing these interactions?
I think I do think it depends on where you are, right? I mean, there are some that I'll talk to that know that they are very blessed to have, I'm sure lots of it has to do with the culture that the leadership has been able to cultivate. But they are, staffed and well staffed. Those are not that many, right? There's many organizations that are just struggling and incredibly. And I think, it depends on where you sit along that spectrum on sort of what bubbles up to the top, right? If you're at 50% staffing or below, staffing's the problem, right? Like there's nothing, it doesn't really matter what else, right? Like you just don't have people to do the work. That's the number one thing. And, and then as that, grows, then you say, okay, well, how do we make sure that, we're able to reduce, there's still going to be burnout. How do we reduce that? And the training works all right. How do you make that better? Right. And so I think it's always finding like the next bottleneck of what the biggest problem is. And that continues, right? And then there's centers that are, have the capacity to say, and you can take different approach for it. There's people, I know folks are doing, non-emergency call handling, saying, look, we can lighten the load that way. Or assistive technology on the call, or right. Like there's all of these different angles, where there's, if you look at, again, the sort of stack of problems, so much opportunity to help. And that's what gets me excited, is there's not an end to the stack of things that like we can continue to help with, for these folks that are overwhelmed and have more important things to focus on.
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, a lot of conversations I've had is like, I can remember 2 or 3 years ago, I'm at a conference, and this 911 supervisor told me that their typical, a small center, so their typical full staffing was like 12.
Okay.
She goes, we're operating at 6 or something like that. I went, how are you operating at all?
Yeah.
And she was like, a lot of overtime. I'm like, oh my gosh. And like, one of my favorite content creators in the fire service, he always talks about retention. Recruitment is one thing, retention's another. Stop putting them together, because you can recruit all you want, but if you don't retain them, the recruitment doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And the first time I heard that, I'm like, oh, that's so true, because I had almost 20 years and I took my toys and went home because I was burned out, had enough, didn't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
When I left in 2019, I could have cared less if I dispatched another police car or fire truck or took another emergency call because I didn't want to do it anymore. And I wasn't the only one. And since then, there's probably half a dozen or 10 colleagues of mine that they did the same thing. They're like, because the retirement's so long in New York State, you got to be 30 years and 55 years old. And it just, by the time you get to 30 years, you're like, and I've seen people, they were just burnt. They were just trying to get there though, trying to get maxed it out, just trying to get there. So that rant leads to, the talk of AI and how AI is making the job easier, and the talk of, AI might take my job, and one of the other best things I ever heard was AI is not going to take your job. The 22-year-old that knows how to code AI, that's who's going to take your job. As you developed your technology and you infused it with AI, what were the biggest wins when it came to here is our technology, even though you kind of created it overnight with a prototype? What were some of the biggest wins? What were some of the biggest wins, not only for the company, but for your customers?
Yeah. So I think one of the really fun parts about where we've used AI, and again, sort of like intellectually interesting for me, was where we landed. And I would love to say it was some huge strategic thinking.
Right.
I don't know. But I think the use of voice AI we caught really early, which was fun, and how that could develop and what that meant. The other is that we at the time, the questions were all around like hallucination. Oh, how do you deal with hallucination? How do you deal with it making stuff up? In our use case, it's like, that's exactly what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to make stuff up, right? Like I don't want it to write out some big script like that. That is not what we were looking for. I want it to be adaptive and dynamic and feel realistic here. And because of that, you get to lean into what the AI does really well, which is just keep going. I'll just roll with it. And so that was a really fun one. And then the other, I think, is just the use of this was non-threatening. So when you hear, oh, it's gonna take my jobs, when somebody would say, oh, you do AI? Nope, not interested. Don't want to do that. We heard that a lot. And like, okay, but like, hear me out for a second. When you think that, you're probably thinking take your job. What I'm saying is you don't have to role play. And that gets a very different reaction. Be like, oh, you can have that job, right? Like that's a job that I'm happy to give up. And I think if you reframe which job it is that it's taking, like, hey, I'm helping you fill out forms less. Is that the job that you want to do? And people are like, no, that's not, right. Let's schedule less, right? It's like if I'm solving those things, those jobs people are happy to give up. And so I think it helps to break down which job am I actually taking here? And that's where we had the biggest win of because it built the trust around it. And then they said, okay, I see what you're doing. I see how you're doing it. And then you get the conversation. What else, could you do here? Because I like your approach here. You're not trying to take my job. It's very clear you're not trying to do that. You're trying to support me and give me time back. And you've been successful in that. Can I give you more things? Right. Like, and I think that was the biggest, is the sort of reframing around which jobs, because a lot of people, we all do lots of jobs that we don't like to do, we would rather not do. And that's where I saw, we've had a lot of success in building the trust.
So important. And not only from public safety end of things, but, one of the things important lessons I learned a while ago was, when it comes to business, like, know, and trust. If you don't have those three, you really don't have much of a business model.
Yeah.
And, it's building that trust and showing that, public safety doesn't know what it doesn't know. And typically it just, the agencies will keep doing what they're doing until you tell them otherwise, and show them this makes your job easier.
And that show them was another important piece in how we built it. When we looked around, the sort of par for the course is, you want to learn what we do, you have to talk with the sales guy. And that's fine. But in an environment where trust needs to be really high, and where with an audience that is, I've learned, just very skeptical, because you deal with all the stuff you deal with. Our approach, we built an open demo, right? So you can go to our website, you can just try it out. And that worked really well, because people then didn't have to hear me pitch anything. It was very transparent around what worked or what didn't work. It was like, look, you just try it, right? And that way they could go in skeptical and then stay skeptical. Ha, see, it didn't work, right? I'm like, okay, that's fine, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or they could say, oh, that was actually sort of interesting. And that ability to be transparent around where the product was and what it was, and like not have to, you can interact on your terms. Like I think that was another way that helped build that trust, was just the transparency of like, here's where it is. Here's what we're trying to do. If you think that could help, great. And if not, that's okay too.
Yeah, no, that's so important. It's like, here, go break it.
Yeah.
Go try to break it. And then we'll both learn something.
Absolutely.
And like, I've been geeking out about AI since 2023 and the stuff that it does and the stuff that it can do. I work with it every day, in many different fashions, and looking what it can, you give it the right information and the outputs are just amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that the more educating that's part of the business model in this industry, the more successful any business will be in this industry.
Yeah.
Because of the misconceptions. That time I was working with NYPD 911, where it was a next gen 911 technology, and I sat down with a dispatcher to see how they did what they did. And the first thing the dispatcher says to me, "How much more work are you going to make me do?" And I went, "I'm hoping to have you do less work."
Yep.
I doubt that. Oh, okay. But there is no gray area with 911 dispatchers ever. Yeah. They will tell you what they're thinking.
Yeah. Which I love. And building a product, that was another, like, building a product in this space is the best, because they'll tell you, like, this does not work and it should work like this and that and the other. And like, you might be wrong on exactly how it should work, but like knowing what does not work is so helpful. And like I love building in this space because of that.
Yeah, for sure. As your business scales and grows and you think about, what's the next goalpost? What's the next stage of growth? What does that look like for you? You've gotten to where you're at, which is pretty outstanding, but what's that next goalpost?
Yeah. I don't know. I think, for us, it's just continuing to help. It's not, I don't have like some huge measuring stick. It's not measured by, hitting some valuation or anything. Like it's just continuing to help people. And there's no shortage of that. Right. And that's on a, it's a whole lot of help that person, help that person, help that person. They stack up, right? Like they just add up. And so it's continuing to help those people and the number of things that we can help with. So I don't know. I don't have a great answer of what the sort of big yardstick is about the next stage. It's really just continuing to help where we can and see where that goes. And I think that's, if we just keep doing that, I think we'll end up somewhere decent.
Great answer. And, it was kind of one of those ones that there's different, I guess there's different mindsets. You have companies that they have that next goalpost, that next valuation, that next revenue point, so on and so on. And I think it's pretty commendable that you're at a point and you have the culture that you build, that it's just like, hey, we're here to help. If you want our help, great. If you don't need our help, think of us later on if you do need our help. And I've always been of the mindset of, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Nothing today? All right, fair enough. We'll check in another time. It's I found that kind of goes a lot farther than sell, revenue. I even when I was working sales in the public safety industry, because of my background and I knew my audience, and I never went in to sell. It was, hey, chief, what can I do for you? Hey, director, what can I do for you? And it tended to work because the walls came down.
Yeah.
Because now it's colleague to colleague. It's not another vendor coming in here to sell me something. So that kind of integrity is I think is a breath of fresh air to a lot of agencies in the industry, then, because there's just, look how fast the industry is turning right now with the technology that's available.
Yeah.
And you got to be mindful of your competitors, but does it really make sense to pattern yourself after a competitor?
Yeah. And on that side, like, there's more than enough problems. It's fantastic that we've got lots of people, trying to solve them, and they make,
Yeah.
and they make it makes everybody better, right? Like the competition's fantastic because it sharpens us to think differently, to think better, and the customer wins on that, right? Like everybody wins.
Yeah.
Like we get better, they get better, the customer gets a better product or a cheaper product, or like all that's great. Those are fantastic outcomes. So no, there's plenty. If it was one one person trying to solve it all, you couldn't do it, you wouldn't do it. And so having multiple voices, approaches, thoughts, good.
Did you ever hear that term of "you don't know what I do"? You don't know what I deal with every day. Have you come across that as you were working with the centers or anything like that?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
I can see where it would come from, but
Yep.
I don't think I've directly ran into it. No.
And yeah, some places they'll sympathize, and like again, I always went back to my experience and being able to help say, hey, listen, I get it. I've done the similar job. I did have NYPD 911 tell me, you have no idea what we deal with every day. So don't tell me you understand it from working in Syracuse, New York. Point taken. I'll never mention it again. So it's,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I know. I mean, I think for me that it was important to always out. Like you don't need to tell me that because I know that, and I'll tell you that I don't know what you do, right? Like
yeah.
And like from the beginning, it was like I always had to ask questions because I literally knew none of it, right? Like and have had to ask questions of all of our customers about what is this, why is this? Like I've had to get really comfortable looking dumb, feeling dumb, of like, look, I just don't know what that thing means that you just said, and I know that I should, and I'm still doing that. I'll get off. I'm sure that I'll get off a call next week and be like, yep, I did not know what that acronym meant, and I'm gonna have to ask somebody, or I'll ask on the call, right. Or like I just don't know. And so yep. I think getting really comfortable with that has been hard for me too. Like I'm like I said, I like to be good at things, and feeling dumb doesn't feel comfortable. Right. But that's been important. And then the other is just like surrounding my at the company, like we've hired folks that have a dozen years or 24 years or more, right, like of experience, and that's really important that we have voices inside here too that do have the credibility and speak, and that can help educate us and and help make sure that we're also just continue to have that customer in mind.
Yeah, customer focused. That typically wins the day. As you look 3 and 5 years ahead and working with 911 and ECCs, what do you think? What can you foreshadow as the difference maker? And it could be technology, it could be otherwise, it could be culture or leadership, whatever. What do you see as that fundamental shift? And it could be a mindset shift or a paradigm shift in 911. As you go along here, what do you see? Anything that you foreshadow? Anything as we move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to what we do. I'm sure there'll be other areas outside of that, right? Like I think for us, as I look at like how we hire folks, like that's changing, right? That we I think we dropped a tool that is no cost for folks because there shouldn't be a barrier for getting the right folks in the door, and that includes a piece that's like a simulation where you get to try it out. And there's a lot of the turnover that happens because you just didn't know what you were getting yourself into. That can mean a lot of things. It can mean you didn't understand shift work. It can mean you didn't understand like, wow, that call was really weighty. That lady just cussed me out, right? Like it can mean a lot of things. And so the more that we can help educate around that and get the right folks in, and we get to work with high school programs that are helping train folks, right? And so I think that is shifting. I think that like who we get and how we get them, I think is already changing because of of where you land with a staffing crisis. And as that changes, I think you get a chance to reset some of what your culture looks like. And what's taken, what is now table stakes, and the use of technology. And, so I think that there's just a lot shifting, and there's an opportunity to do some of that reset for folks, and what, all the way through, right? So hiring the right folks and then training them, and then the technology they get to use on calls that does real-time translation, transcription, like things that you would never have had, and being able to put that into place that really supports the person doing the job, because it is overwhelming when you've got 7 screens and 2 keyboards and multiple audio inputs, a foot pedal like that's a lot, and so if you can support that person better all along the way, like that's what I think is going to change, is that we've got a lot of new investment focused on how do you just support that person. Again, lots of different approaches. So that's a little rambly, but some of where I'm seeing.
No, that's perfect. And that's some great insight. Realistically, I've always, and I've said this too many times, but you take care of your folks, they'll take care of you. The better you're prepared your folks are, the less pushback that you get on things, the less error that you get, the more that the team is involved in, the entire aspect of the operation, the more buy-in that they have. It's all these things that play into retention to be able to keep people. I think it's fantastic work that you and your company are doing. I think that, the technology that you brought to the table just to solve that, how it started just in training, that small piece of, here, we're going to create the scenarios and the characters, and now your people get to train like it's the real deal. We definitely didn't have that 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So fantastic work. And I think that's a great place to end it. So
thank you.
Zach, I appreciate you joining me at the kitchen table today. The challenges in 911, really, a lot of times it doesn't get solved with one piece of technology or one product, one hiring campaign, recruitment, retention. It really requires the industry as a whole to take a look at how we're recruiting people, how we're retaining them, how we're preparing them, how are you leading them, the culture that you're building. All of that is so important. And realistically, AI can help with a lot of it. It's not going to help with all of it.
Yeah.
AI can definitely help with a lot of it. And really that's the goal. Zach, what's the best way for people to connect with you if they wanted to connect and have a conversation?
Yeah. Shoot me an email, connect with me on LinkedIn. My email is Zak, ZAK at thisgen.ai. And, I would love to connect with anybody who's interested. Hit up our website, thisgen.ai, and we would learn more, love the conversation, however we can help. Truly, we would love to.
Awesome. Zach, feel free to open door to come back on the podcast to talk about anything. You come across something you want to chat about, I'm glad to have you back. Such a great conversation. Like I said, we've traveled similar paths, and it's great to see where your company's at and where you're going and the success that you've had. So once again, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. For everybody else, thank you for joining us. Please share this with your folks, with the world. Let us know what you think of the podcast episode. Drop a comment if you're watching this later on. So this is episode 9 of At the Kitchen Table podcast. And as always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and have a great day.